The case that I propose is one of Gary Wilcox, a farmer in Newark Valley, New York, saw two occupants in an egg-shaped craft. But they didn't fly off the second they saw Mr. Wilcox. In fact, according to him, he spent 2 hours conversing with these Martians.
So was it then kind of cigar-shaped as these tip tanks are?
No, it was more egg-shaped than anything. It was about 20 foot long, 15 or 16 foot wide, about 4 foot deep.
About 10 a.m., I was spreading manure in lower field above my house and barn. Noticed a white or shiny object above the field, just on inside edge of woods. I was curious and drove the tractor and manure spreader up to the edge of the woods and stopped. Got a closer look at the object and thought it to be a fuselage or fuel tank from a plane. That's interesting. Question, what did you do? Answer, I thumped it and kicked it. Felt like a metallic canvas. So cool. Might be the only person in history to thump and kick a UFO. Question, then what? Answer, 2 men appeared from under the object. These men were holding what seemed to be a metal tray approximately 1 foot square filled with alfalfa, with roots and soil, leaves and brush. The men were attired in what seemed to be white or some kind of metallic suits, with no part of their body showing. So the difference here between the Lonnie Zamora case and the Wilcox case is, first of all, the craft, although appeared to have the same texture. The one in the Lonnie Zamora case also had a symbol on it, some type of like alien symbol. Who knows? Maybe this was on the other side of the craft and Mr. Wilcox couldn't see it. But secondly, the beings, although I think we're going to get into maybe at least describing them a bit, were the same height, but the ones in the Zamora case wore overalls. All right, so maybe they got changed. They were no longer in their farm suits. I don't know. Question, were you frightened? Answer, I sure was. I didn't say much for the first few minutes, but thought it was some kind of a trick being pulled on me. Question, what were the first words spoken? Answer, they said, do not be alarmed. They asked what I was doing, what the tractor, manure spreader, and manure was. I told them I was spreading manure. I talked and answered their questions for 2 hours and learned they had been watching me for quite a while. They were very interested in organic substances such as soil, as Mars is made up of rocky substances not fit for growing. Was told that in the future, Mars and Earth will be trading environments due to the rockets, missiles, and miscellaneous objects being ejected into space from Earth. Now, folks, I'll be honest, this is where I get a little bit skeptical. Not necessarily skeptical of Mr. Wilcox, perhaps he is telling the truth, but skeptical of the information being passed to him. Perhaps he's being psyoped by these aliens early on, but they say they're from Mars, all right? Now, back then, there was a bit of a, we're coming out of the sort of Space Brothers era where all these human-looking aliens said that they were from Venus, the Venusian aliens, and now we've transitioned into Martians, So maybe, who knows, maybe these aliens caught wind of our sci-fi movies. That's the first thing. The second thing here is that there is a bit of a discrepancy between what was said, or how it was said, rather. In the early accounts, I do believe that he says, even in the interview, that the beings spoke to him using words. And then I think the second time, a little later on, the communication that was had was had telepathically. It's interesting here because they say, do not be alarmed. But then I think in the phone interview, if I'm not mistaken, they follow that up by saying, we've spoken to humans before, and then proceed to tell them they're from Mars. I asked them if I could go back with them. Was told I could not due to the thinness of atmosphere. They also said it was impossible for them to land in congested areas. The fumes of traffic were too dense. They also mentioned that astronauts Glenn and Grissom and the 2 astronauts from Russia would die within a year due to exposure of space. They seemed interested in learning the art of farming and growing. After learning that fertilizer would enrich this art, they wanted to know more about it. They did not seem to know what cows were either. They said they usually did not appear after dark, as their metallic ship would be too obvious. The voices seemed to come from what might be the chest of the men, and they had an eerie sound. Okay, so this is interesting. Now we're talking about somebody trying to describe potentially what telepathy would be. You know, if you're hearing it in your head, you're assuming it's coming from somewhere. And so maybe it was coming from their chest. That's a really interesting detail. And after being advised not to mention the incident, after a burring and swishing sound, they disappeared to the north. Only marks remaining that I could detect were a kind of red dust, evidently from propulsion, where the vehicle rested. I could not tell if it actually was resting on the ground. It seemed to be larger than an auto, approximately 20 feet long and 14 feet wide, and shaped like an egg.